Welcome to Ask Leo Answercast number 137. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be answering more questions that people have been asking out at AskLeo.com. Today's Answercast, it's brought to you by my new book, The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance. This is all about keeping your computer running better and longer. That's what the Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance is all about. Culled from the articles on Ask Leo, it'll help you speed up your computer, free up space, and basically avoid spending money that you just don't need to spend by making that machine last as long as possible. The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance can be purchased in either of three formats, a downloadable PDF, or as a Kindle book, or as a paperback from Amazon. Regardless of which one you choose, once you register your book using the link that's in the book, you'll be able to download any or all of the three different digital formats, PDF, Mobi, or EPUB. Also, maybe even more importantly, once you register that book, you'll also get access to companion videos that demonstrate the various steps that are outlined in the book. Now, I see people discarding computers way too early. It just doesn't have to be that way, especially when the problem that they're trying to solve is all about the software, not the hardware. The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance can help. Visit askleo.com/guide to learn more and purchase your copy today. Leo, sometimes when I attempt to connect to my local coffee house's Wi-Fi, I can connect to a strong signal that has limited or no connectivity. But others in the house are connected with no problem at the same time. The shop owner's not willing to reset the router because it might take down his credit card machine or other patrons. All perfectly logical. Anyway, is there a setting in my laptop that might improve this situation? Rebooting does not help. Disabling wireless and restarting does not help. I'm using Windows XP Pro, Service Pack 3, with all updates. So wireless and internal and external and via USB both have failed. I'm not trying to connect them at the same time. As did Wireless G on another of my laptops also fail, even though several other patrons are connected okay on the same wireless. I seem to be the only one having this problem, but the problem is intermittent. Sometimes I can connect okay. Why would some be able to connect while others not, all at the same time? Unfortunately, there's not a setting in your computer that's in your control that I'm aware of that would actually make this any better. I do have some ideas, but the bottom line is that other than trying again and again until it works, since it is intermittent, I don't really have any good magical answers that are just going to make this problem go away for you. That is, in fact, my first recommendation. Try again. And by try again, I mean actually meaning turning off your Wi-Fi interface and turning it back on again. Sounds like you've already done that. In some cases, that's right-clicking on a network icon that represents the connection and clicking on Disable, wait, and then right-click on it again and click on Enable. In other cases, you may have a taskbar notification area icon that you can use for this. But the old turn it off and turn it back on again trick is still the best that I know of in situations like this. So, what's happening? Well, you're correct in that limited connectivity means that the physical connection has been made. The wireless is connected. So your laptop, your computer is indeed connected as far as the router, but no further. No IP address has actually been assigned to your computer by that router. Now, I suspect either of two things are going on here, and they're both related to that router. First, it's simply overloaded. If there are a lot of people connected, the router could just be working too hard to get around to assigning you an IP address. You could, of course, blame a cheap router, but I wouldn't be able to say one way or the other without knowing the exact model of router that the coffee house is using. As I sit here in Starbucks writing my notes for this, for example, there are perhaps a dozen computers connected. Even if twice that many, it should be able to handle that kind of load. But like I said, I just don't know what kind of router your coffee house is using, nor do I know what Starbucks is using for that matter. Second, it is possible that there's a configured limit. It's possible that the router has been configured with a preset limit on the number of machines that it will actually allow to connect at the same time. So perhaps it's over the limit. Unfortunately, that's not something I actually expect the barista or perhaps even the shop owner to know about. It's one of those things that's probably configured when the device is initially installed, however long ago that may have been, and then forgotten by everybody except for, well, whoever installed it. So ultimately, the only real answer I can give you in a situation like this is to keep trying. That's usually what works for me when I run into this situation, but I haven't in a really long time, mostly because I suspect that the places I'm visiting have good equipment, have lots of connectivity, and are set up to handle lots of people at the same time. I'm a second-year computer science student in college. Some of my peers and other IT professionals keep telling me that in order to work well on your computer without anything coming into your way, like having some important pop-ups denied or having some authentic downloads denied, you need to turn off the firewall. They say for as long as you have an up-to-date antivirus software, you're safe. How true is this, and can I really be safe with my firewall off? Again, considering that I have a perfectly working antivirus software. Yes, you need a firewall, and no, a firewall isn't going to prevent some kind of pop-up or authentic download that you initiate. Basically, I disagree with what people have been telling you, and I actually disagree fairly strongly. The single most important job of a firewall is to prevent incoming connections to your computer. That's why I recommend a NAT router as a firewall. That protection comes as a side effect of how it handles sharing the internet between multiple machines. Now, that same kind of protection can come from software firewalls as well. So if you're not behind a router, or you're connected to a network where there is perhaps questionable security, in other words, it's open or there are other people who have less than good or safe practices on their own security, then it's a good idea to turn the software firewall on as well. These days, to be honest, I actually don't see a reason not to leave the Windows firewall on all the time. Things just work. Now, the misconceptions here are a couple. One is firewalls don't block pop-ups, and the other, of course, is that they don't prevent downloads. That's in fact what your anti-malware and other security software might attempt to do. Firewalls block what's coming into your machine unannounced or unrequested. And even though you think of a pop-up as something that's coming into your machine unrequested, in reality, it's because you visited a web page that has asked for it. Same thing with downloads. A download doesn't come at your machine uninvited. It's something that you request. A properly configured firewall just isn't going to get in the way of that. It's going to allow the pop-ups you need to see to happen and the downloads you've requested to download. Now, the concept of a firewall is in fact getting blurry. Many anti-malware tools actually try and do, well, everything. They're antivirus, they're anti-spyware. Some of them actually do provide a firewall. So it's possible that some of your peers are confusing the two. But if anything is going to get in the way of your pop-ups and your downloads, it's in fact your anti-malware software and not the firewall. The bottom line is that yes, you need a firewall, be it a NAT router or a software firewall on your machine. A firewall shouldn't block legitimate traffic that you request. And besides, that last statement of yours, there is no such thing as perfect anti-malware software. There just isn't. A firewall is an additional layer of protection that just makes sense. How do I set and use my laptop screen and TV screen together? Unfortunately, this really depends a lot on the type of TV, the specific model of the TV, and the specific model of your computer. But what I'll do here is I'll look at a few of the details that factor into this kind of a thing. Modern TVs, most of the modern flat screen TVs, typically have two types of input. HDMI, which handles both video and sound, or DVI, which is video only. On some, you might find a VGA connector. This is an older analog type that is actually very much computer related. There are often also round what are called RCA connectors. These are the ones that you would use to connect the audio in conjunction with either the DVI or VGA connectors. If your TV has none of these, then it's simply unlikely that it could be used as a computer monitor at all. Or in situations where it could, it'll probably look pretty darned bad. Now, your laptop needs to have some kind of a video output. Most do. Older ones will have a VGA connector. More current ones will have either a DVI or an HDMI or something that's called DisplayPort. When you're connecting same to same, the ideal, it's just that connector. It's just a cable that has that connector ready to go. I prefer HDMI if it's available at both ends, simply because it's one cable that carries both video and audio. Sometimes you can convert from one to the other, but not all combinations will work or work well. And of course, if you're using a connection that doesn't include audio, again, VGA or DVI, then you'll need an additional cable for sound. Typically what that means is that you'll be plugging one end into a speaker or headphone output on your PC, and then the other end to some kind of audio input on the TV. Many people will often just use the laptop's own built-in speakers for sound if all they're really trying to do is get a picture on the screen. Now, connecting is really only half the problem. Next, you got to make it work. Windows 7 and Windows 8 support the Windows plus P key. In other words, hold down the Windows key and type P, the letter P. That enters what's called presentation mode. What that does is it allows you to choose how multiple screens should be used. It can choose between duplicating whatever is on your laptop screen so that whatever is on your laptop screen shows up on the external monitor or TV. Note that the resolution of your laptop screen might change if this is enabled. If the TV is not capable of supporting the same resolution as your laptop, then typically Windows will reduce the resolution so that it can be the same on both screens. The other option, or another option, is to make it an extension of your desktop, meaning that you can move things from one screen to another, much like a dual monitor situation. And of course, you can select to have one or the other, where the one you're not using is simply turned off or shows black. Older laptops and older versions of Windows will often use function keys on the laptop keyboard. It's often a blue FN key that's used in conjunction with another key, perhaps a key that has a monitor icon on it, to cycle through the various options available. In other words, you type it once, you get one combination, you type it again, you get a different combination, and so on. Ultimately, this all applies to pretty much any second monitor or screen you might use, be it a laptop or a desktop, no matter how they're connected. Be it a TV or a computer monitor, and as it turns out, it's also very common for laptops in business settings where people are making presentations using projectors, which ultimately are nothing more than a different kind of computer monitor or television. Why haven't you mentioned Crypto Prevent? So I want to talk a little bit about Crypto Prevent because while it's an interesting tool for preventing the crypto locker malware from encrypting everything on your machine, there are some issues I have with it. Not necessarily bad issues with the software, but some of the side effects of actually using it. Crypto Prevent is really just a utility that prevents Crypto Locker from running. It's fine. To be honest, it's fine. If you want to run it, by all means, go ahead and run it. There are a couple of side effects, and I'll talk about those in a minute, but they're probably not the kind of side effects that are going to impact you in any tangible way. My concern is twofold. One, that we're spending a lot of effort focusing on one specific piece of malware, which is questionable. And two, running Crypto Prevent might be giving us a false sense of security when it comes to actually understanding how safe our machines are. So let's talk a little bit about how Crypto Prevent works and why. CryptoPrevent works by blocking the execution of programs from a certain location or certain locations. These are locations that are not normally used by legitimate software. But apparently, people have found out that these are locations that are used by specifically CryptoLocker. As such, for now, what it represents is a way to prevent CryptoLocker from running on your machine and encrypting all your files. Like I said, it's fine, run it if you like, but my opinion is that it's actually the wrong solution to the problem. The issue is not that we should be trying to avoid one specific kind of malware. Yes, it's bad, but it's only malware. Malware with particularly bad effects, don't get me wrong, but it's malware nonetheless. It should serve as a reminder that all malware is bad, and all malware should be avoided. We should be doing what we can to avoid all malware, not just CryptoLocker. The problem is, of course, that the next one that comes along could be as bad or worse and not do the same things that CryptoPrevent is preventing. So, only you can prevent malware. My concern is that running CryptoLocker will just give people a false sense of security. Just because you run CryptoPrevent, it doesn't make you safe. It prevents one class of malware, one very specific class of malware actually, and not all. In fact, if CryptoLocker were to make a difference on your machine, it's because you already allowed CryptoLocker to be downloaded onto your machine. That is the real failure. That is what needs to be prevented, because the things that prevent that are the kinds of things that prevent all malware. The right way to deal with CryptoLocker is to treat it just like any other malware. Don't open email attachments that you aren't absolutely certain are safe. That's the way CryptoLocker actually most commonly propagates, is via email attachments. Just in general, remember to use the internet safely with a healthy degree of skepticism. Follow my article, Internet Safety, 8 Tips to Keep Your Computer Safe on the Internet, that basically covers the basics of how to keep your machine safe, not just from CryptoLocker, but from all malware, which is really the point. Now, there is a fairly lengthy discussion of CryptoLocker, how it works, why it works, how CryptoPrevent works in excruciating detail out at bleepingcomputer.com, and I'll include a link in the notes for this particular podcast and article. But like I said, that I want to provide as kind of interesting information, but it's not necessarily the approach that I think I want most people to follow. What I care about, what I truly care about, is that people learn to stay away from malware in general. Those techniques will work not just for CryptoLocker, but for all the other malware that's out there as well. What can I do if my laptop will not boot from the DVD drive and I need to restore my machine? This is actually becoming a little bit more and more of an issue as optical drives are becoming, well, more optional on many smaller computers. There are a few solutions or approaches to think about taking. First, if you actually have a CD or DVD drive and the system just doesn't even appear to be trying to boot from it, you'll need to look into changing your boot order. What that is it's a setting in your computer's BIOS. When your computer starts up, it actually looks at several different devices, like the hard drive, the optical drive, the CD or DVD, any connected USB drives, and asks each one in turn, is there anything I can boot from here? As soon as the answer to that question is yes, the system stops looking for things to boot from and boots from the one that it found first. So if it checks the hard drive and finds Windows before it actually looks at the CD/DVD burner, then it'll always ignore whatever's inserted and boot from the hard drive all the time. Now, the BIOS should let you change the order that check happens. Unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly how, because that differs dramatically depending on, well, your computer and your computer's BIOS. They all do it differently. They all have different user interface. They all have different steps to get to this control. What I recommend you set it to is checking in this order: the CD or DVD first, then USB, and then your hard disk. Now, I'll also throw out that in many cases, if there is a physical problem with your CD or DVD drive, in other words, it's broken or something like that, then the thing to do, well, is to get it fixed. On desktop machines, these drives really aren't that hard to replace, and they're also pretty inexpensive. For what it's worth, CD and DVD drives, they're great dust catchers. So one other thing to look at in the physical world is if you haven't used it for a while, blowing it out with a little bit of compressed air, a little can of compressed air, might also actually help clear things up. Now, if you don't have a CD or DVD drive, or it's just not going to get fixed, then things get a little bit more interesting. I've actually prepared for this by purchasing an external USB DVD drive. It's not big, and like the internals, it's not really that expensive. If your computer will allow you to boot from USB, which is one of the things I made sure we changed the order to earlier on, then it's very possible that your computer can boot from a CD or DVD inserted into an external DVD USB drive. And of course, the external drive is portable. It can be used on pretty much any machine you happen to be having troubles with, or you just want to actually read or use a CD or DVD. Now, if that's not an option, well, then things get a little bit more difficult. Booting from USB, in other words, a USB RAM stick, is certainly one option, but only if whatever it is you're trying to use is actually provided on a USB RAM stick or as a download that can be placed on a USB stick. There are several utilities out there that claim to create such a thing, but I've never really been comfortable with the ones that could, for example, create a USB bootable Windows installation disk. Besides not being necessarily legal, I sometimes question exactly whether or how well it will work. If you can find one and it works for you, fantastic. But particularly, as in your question, when you're trying to restore your machine to, say, a factory initial settings, the actual thing to do in a case like this, where you've basically run out of options, is to contact the computer's manufacturer and see if they can provide something that would work for you. They may have a download that you can then put onto a USB RAM stick, or they may be able to send you something that would allow you to do the restore you need to do. Leo, a PC security measure that I've come across recently is one where we should scan our router for open ports. What's an open port, and how are they created? How do we scan our routers for these open ports, and how do we close them when we find them? I have a combination modem router, and I'm running Windows XP SP3. Open ports, particularly on routers, aren't really something that I worry about, and to be honest, I wouldn't spend a lot of time trying to track them down and close them, to be blunt. That being said, the concept is kind of interesting and opens up a bit of a window as to just how the internet works. So, what's a port, and what does it mean for a port to be open or not? Servers on the internet can perform many, many different functions. Some are set up to basically present you web pages, like AskLeo.com is. Some can accept mail to send. So if I send mail from my computer here, it connects to, well, another server on the internet that accepts mail. Servers can collect email to be delivered. So when I download my email or when I view my email, I'm connecting up to a server in a particular way that allows it to provide me with the email that it has been collecting for me. And of course, you can transfer files to and from various servers and many, many, many more things. A port? It's just how those things are all identified. Ultimately, a port is just a number. When your browser requests a page from a web server, it connects to that server at an IP address, but with that connection, it specifies a number. That number tells the server what kind of service the connection wants to use. Port number 80 is the web service. So when you connect to AskLeo.com, it actually first translates AskLeo.com into an IP address and then sends that IP address along with the number 80 to the server that houses AskLeo.com. That way the server knows that this is a request specifically to talk to the web page service on it. Connect to a different port, and you'd be connecting to something else, like mail or FTP or any number of other things. Speaking of mail, your mail program probably connects to your mail provider's server exactly the same way as I just described for web, except it uses port number 25 to send mail and port 110 if it wants to receive mail. Other ports might be used for other purposes. If you upload files to a server using FTP, you're using ports number 21 and 22. And again, all these are numbers that identify what service it is you want to connect to on the server, on the machine that you're connecting to. So, what happens if you make an attempt to connect to port 80 when the server that you're connecting to doesn't actually have a web server? Well, the browser can't connect. What happens next will depend on your browser and just how helpful it is in describing the problem, but ultimately, it can't. When a server is not listening to a port, in other words, it's not set up to receive incoming connections on that port is said to be closed. No response will be generated. So, conversely, you can understand what an open port means. An open port means that if someone tries to connect to that port on the server is going to respond in some way. The response could be, yep, let's do this. I accept your connection. I have whatever it is you want. Or it could say, sorry, you know what? I don't support whatever that particular service that you're trying to connect to implies. So, it could also be, like I said, some form of rejecting the connection, and this is where it kind of gets muddy. So, your router has open ports. This really doesn't worry me. Your router is protecting your machine by acting as a firewall, which means that whether the ports are open or not, incoming connections are simply not accepted. Now, there's one possible exception, and that's remote management. In other words, if you can connect to your router to manage your router from the internet side of your router, well, that's an open port that might actually generate a response, and if you know how to connect and have the password, you might be able to use that. In general, it should be turned off. Remote management should be turned off, and that's something you turn off by managing the router and looking for that option in its options screens. So how do you test all this stuff about open ports and closed ports and some other things? Well, there is a service. It's called Shields Up. It's out at grc.com. That's Gibson Research Corporation, run by Steve Gibson, who's been around forever. And what it will do is it will tell you in overwhelming detail what ports are open, what's not, what are so-called stealth mode, and so on. Basically, it'll give you the detailed report that you're looking for. Now, I will say this. My big caveat with Shields Up is that, in my opinion, the site is excessively alarmist. It will claim that things are horribly insecure, or it will imply that things are horribly insecure, when in fact they are not. I would not panic based on the results you find at grc.com's Shields Up. So, my bottom line, ultimately, it's all kind of interesting, like I said, to understand how the internet kind of works, but as long as you're behind a router, it's just not something I would spend any time worrying about. I know I don't. Well, there's this week's Answercast. I do the Answercast every week, so if you have a question about your computer, the internet, or technology, head out to AskLeo.com, search for your answer there, or ask it. You might actually hear it answered here in a future Answercast. I also put out a newsletter every week. I hope you're subscribed. The Ask Leo newsletter includes answers and fixes and safety tips and opinions and even the occasional answers to just why things are the way they are. Please back up. I plug this every week in the Answercast because it's so incredibly important. Nothing can save you from almost any disaster like a proper and recent backup. All of my answers, they're based on my own personal experience, and they should be used entirely at your own risk. Much as we might want it to be otherwise, I really don't know you or your abilities or the specifics of your machine, and those kinds of details can make all the difference in the world. The Ask Leo Answercast is a production of Ask Leo and is copyright 2013. Thanks for listening. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be back soon with another Ask Leo Answercast.